Oh, we are live. We're live on Facebook. We're also live here on Zoom. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. We are here in Warriors of Light Show, which is a masterclass series that we are doing with Africa's leading spiritual, indigenous, and wellness experts from all across this beautiful planet of ours. And today we're doing episode 8 with Mkhulu Mhleli Linda. Hello. Welcome, Mkhulu.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you very much. Good evening to one and all. Sanbonani, Thokozani, Makos.
Thank you for joining us here today in this really important and powerful conversation of know thyself, because in all things, this is the origin of understanding your experience and basically going deeper in your path of healing, of spirituality. It starts with the self. So I'm really excited for us to dive deep today and to explore this powerful conversation, particularly for us as African people, Black people, because knowing ourselves is not a thing we know how to do or a thing that has been cultivated within us. So today we're going to be exploring and expanding on and contemplating and meditating on this conversation.
Indeed. I have the pleasure of taking this journey with you and with our humble guests, or rather audience. I'm the guest today. You know, I'm so used to being the host. So today I'm the guest. Wow. It's a different feeling, I can tell you.
I know, it's a beautiful feeling to now finally step up, step in front and be the leading voice. You are our leading voice today.
Yes.
Yes. And for everyone who's joining us here on Zoom, thank you. We will be using the chat to chat with us throughout the conversation. And in the last 15 minutes or so of our conversation, we will open for questions and answers. And you should be able to see the Q&A in your gadget. So you can use the Q&A specifically for asking questions and the chat for just, chatting with us throughout throughout the conversation, right? And if you're joining us on Facebook, because we're also live on Facebook, feel free to also ask questions during the Q&A part of our conversation, and I will come to those questions when it's time for that. Yes. Okay, so good. Okay, I have shared with everyone and we are ready to begin. Okay. So I wanted us to begin with a brief grounding, as well as just commanding and setting our sacred space so that that which is going to be shared here is coming from our sacred heart and it's connected with the higher knowledge, higher wisdom that is all around us. Right? So for this part, if you are able to, I ask you to close your eyes and to bring your right hand to your heart and the other hand to your solar plexus, the navel area or womb area, wherever you're feeling that. And if you're able to allow your feet to be grounded in the air, and we allow ourselves to come to our higher heart center and to return to our home, our inner home. And we return using the breath, taking a deep breath from the womb if you're female, and from your root chakra, the base of the spine if you're Now, breathing from that point to the heart. And as we breathe out, we release all that we've been holding. And we become aware of the diamond seed of light, spark of blue light in our heart, which is symbolic of our essence, our soul essence, becoming alive and recalibrating. You may even see that energy just beginning to move from the heart and beginning to move down through your feet and into the earth, into the soil of our mother, Gaia Sophia, and beginning to see that energy. And this energy, you are releasing all that you've been holding throughout the day. You're sending it down. We're sending it down to Earth core in the galactic womb of our mother, through our Earth star into the womb, and just release, so that all the worries, all the stress of the day may be sent down to be transmitted with unconditional love. And from our mother, Gaia Sophia, this living, breathing being, sends us the diamond flame, healing light code that returns through the soil into our feet once again, and open yourself to receive this love, this light. And allow yourself to feel that love in your heart, and allow that love to go up through the crown, your crown chakra, the top of your head, and through the soul star, the part that connects you to your soul, and all the way to the great central sun, to the heavens. And here we invite in, we connect with our beloved God, we connect with our luminous ancestors, we connect with the councils of our higher selves, with the councils of light that work with all of us here today in this particular point in human history. And we set the space with that grace, that love coming in from the higher heavens. And we take a final deep breath in, returning once again to the body. And we release and open our eyes. And we come back.
That feels good.
I feel good as well. I feel the desire to yawn. I was telling you that I was feeling a big yawn around your energy is now calm now. So we are good.
Great.
Yes. So Mkhulu, we are here in conversation, in a contemplation of knowing the self, knowing thyself, and such a broad conversation. But in beginning, may we begin with contemplating why it's important for us to know the self, particularly as African people.
Thanks. The importance of knowing oneself runs pretty deep, in a sense that it it is the beginning of everything about you. And it is the end of everything about you. So when you don't know yourself, you lose your bearing, you lose, in essence, who you are. And you cannot even begin to understand what are you supposed to give into the world and what are you supposed to receive from the world. And as a result, you'll find that because we have lost our sense of self, we do some of the harshest things. We raise our hands to women. You see with the gender-based violence. Um, we don't live in peace and harmony. We don't live in one with nature, simply because we don't understand who we are. So the minute you start understanding yourself, you'll begin to understand, for example, the concept of Ubuntu, Butu, I am because you are. You will actually understand that that even goes further than just us interacting as human beings. I am because the tree is. I am because the soil is. I am because the sky is. I am because the bird is. Then you are able to live in harmony in the environment. So knowing yourself is where it all begins. And that is the most important part to successful living. But also, I want to introduce this aspect because we tend to think that because we are in the flesh, that is the end all and be all. We must understand that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. So if you grasp that concept, you begin to understand that you then need to know yourself. And when I'm saying know yourself, I'm not talking about just know your name and surname. I'm not talking about know your parents. I'm not talking about know your family. I'm talking about who am I? What am I? What is within and what is without? So you begin to internalize what is it that makes me in terms of the spiritual realm before I look at what is physically available in terms of the flesh, in terms of tangible objects around me. So knowing yourself is actually the beginning. Um, there are other scholars that I read and other professors and learned persons in the world out there. And I've learned from the things that they talk about that knowing yourself is also self-mastery. So my understanding, therefore, is when you come to the part of knowing yourself, in simple terms, it means you are overcoming your animalistic nature. So then you start to overcome the flesh. Then you start interacting in another dimension, in the spiritual dimension. We are, as Africans, spiritual beings after all. So we need to understand how to interact with each other at that level. Even when we greet, sawubona, the spirits within me, my ancestors, acknowledge the ancestors and the spirits within you. That's the acknowledgement.
Yeah, yes, this is profound truth, primordial truth that our ancestors knew and understood, and it's within our languages, within our cultures, our norms, our tradition, where you could see that this knowledge was fused into our experiences, how we interacted with each other, right?
Yes.
And unfortunately, that knowledge has not necessarily lost us, but we are no longer as attuned and aware of it, and we're no longer centering it into our daily lives, right? So even when we speak the statement we're spiritual beings having a human experience, at this point, it's something that a lot of people know, but it's not something that we really understand and we really know how to embody. And I believe that's where the self mastery comes in, the embodiment of your spirit self while you are having this human experience and living your life from that embodiment. It's very difficult for most people, right? So if we're seeking to understand this, how can we, no, before this one, for us African people, we lost this knowledge because of the experiences that have happened to us. And so most of us, we really don't understand. Just from your own experience as someone who's been going deep into understanding this, what can you say and share with us on who we are as spirit beings who are having the African experience? That makes sense.
Yes. I think it's important for us to go back a little bit in terms of who we are as, not just as individuals, but as a people, in terms of the continent, this awesome continent of Africa. When we look at who are we, we're going to have to go back in time and look at the way in which our ancestors lived, their ancient wisdom, the wisdom that existed during the pre-colonial era, the and when I say pre-colonial, I'm talking about both the European and the Arab invasions of this continent. So, because the Arabs were the first to invade, okay, there were the Hyksos and so on and so forth in Kemet, but in essence, I want to go back to a period where there were no invasions on this continent, where we were just Africans living on this continent on our own. There are things which our ancestors used to do. There is a way of life, a way of life that was united. And it's not to say, sometimes when I talk like this, people say, yeah, but then how do you explain the wars and so on? And I'm saying, yes, there's even between siblings, there are fights. But does it mean that the siblings don't love each other? Even between families, relatives, we will disagree and we will fight. But does it mean that we don't love each other? Does it mean that we want to harm each other to the extent that we destroy each other? So yes, there were wars of competition and so on and so forth, but even the way we did things, the rules of engagement were different. For example, women and children were not harmed. Even men who were not part of the regiment were not harmed. So it's basically the warriors who went out into the battlefield um, who engaged in battle. So the way in which things were done was different. Now, when we come back and we look at Ubuntu, we look at Ma'at, we look at the principles that are not from outside in, as you would see in terms of our laws right now. For example, yes, you understand that it is incorrect to steal. So theft is a crime. But you also understand that in as much as theft is a crime, if the police don't catch you, it's okay. So it is until that point that you are caught that you then think, oh my gosh, I've been caught, now I must be answerable. Whereas the internal principles say you need to understand within yourself that theft is incorrect and it should not be done. So at the end of the day, you judge yourself to ask yourself, did I not steal today? Did I not harm another today? Did I not speak ill of another today? That is righteous living. You right yourself before anybody rights you. So this is the way in which our ancestors used to live. And in order for you to live that way, You need to understand what these principles are. You need to understand, even in terms of our indigenous languages, for example. I listen to people say, particularly Europeans, would say that African law has never been codified. And I think to myself, but that is absurd, because everything about us is law. Law is in our language, the way you speak. Law is in our conduct, the way you would never, you not dare take something from an elderly person or from your senior um, with one hand or with the left hand. That's a sign of disrespect. You would never talk to somebody with your back faced to them. That's a sign of disrespect. You would never talk standing up. It's a sign of disrespect. So these are laws which are inbuilt into our conduct, our culture, our beliefs, our language. So when one says, but your laws were not written down, um, it is wrong in that regard, as I have mentioned, but it is also wrong in another sense, that the first people to write anything down were Africans, way before Europeans even came out of their caves. Okay, so African people did write. And when we look at some of the styles of writing, Europeans tend to then say, oh, those are paintings, those are Bushman paintings. Simply because you don't understand what it means doesn't make it a painting. It is a form of communication. It is writing. So those are the things that I keep saying. Understand who we are as a people, who our ancestors are, and you will begin to appreciate your greatness as a person.
Mm. Yes, yes. I love this so much. It is a code, like our ancestors were leaving codes, which is different from just the written word. It's in seeing that the wisdom will be invoked within us, right? With the paintings. So I love that so much. One of the questions that has always really deeply troubled me is, what is it particularly about the African, the Black person, that seems to draw other races to want to oppress us? When we look at our history, we were here in the continent, and we are some of the first people. We are the civilizations that have risen and fallen with all that great civilizations, and we're still here. And our DNA can go all the way back to the ancient ancestors, original humans, earthlings, and so on. So what is it particularly that seems to call in this oppression and suppression of the truth of who we are, of our origins, of our history, just from your own understanding and your own thoughts, really?
Okay. Over and above that, I have an opinion about the subject matter. The fact, in terms of archaeology and anthropology, remains that our ancestors did very many great things. They brought civilization right through the world, okay, on every continent. Our ancestors brought civilization, they brought greatness. Now, understand that also during the time when our ancestors got into Kemet, because remember, Kemet is a place of storage, or it used to be a place of storage and perfection. So it incorporates a lot of other African aspects, okay, even here in the South. I'll give you an example. We have a place here in the South called Inzaluyelane in Mpumalanga, okay, the birthplace of the sun. That is where Kemet actually started, okay? And our ancestors migrated along the Nilotic Meridian, the Golden Meridian, and at every instant, they got together. So the technology kept on improving, they kept on sharing, and eventually they reached Kemet, where they perfected all of these ideas, okay? Now, Because of this, I've learned from Dr. Ivan van Sertima that Kemet was in itself about 55,000 years old in terms of its civilization before the first foreigner came into Kemet in the form of the Hyksos and the Europeans. Okay, so by then, all 72 pyramids had already been built. Now, when you come back and you read, for example, biblical stories telling you about the Jews who built pyramids, you can start understanding why we are being attacked, because everybody wants a piece of this greatness that our ancestors made. Okay, now, when you listen to the story about the Jews building the pyramids, historically, let me not even talk about history. Let's talk about archaeological records, anthropological records. To this day, there is no grave of a single Jew anywhere on African soil, that is in Kemet. So it cannot be true that there were Jews building pyramids, right? That's the first point. The second point is, if indeed Jews did build pyramids, then it would mean that you would have artisans, architects, technicians, bricklayers, and you name it, okay? These are the people whom Moses would have allegedly rescued out of Kemet. Now, these people would be rescued with their skill from building pyramids, correct? You should therefore see that work translate into Jerusalem, Israel, Europe, and everywhere else in terms of the manner in which the structures in Kemet were being built. But you don't see that. Okay, you walk through Israel, you will not see any influence of Kemet in Israel. So then it can't be true that people were rescued from Kemet out of this oppression and horrible living standards and what have you, and went into Israel, because there's no basis for that type of thinking at all. You don't see that, even if they don't build pyramids, but the manner in which those buildings, those structures would have been constructed, you would see the same engineering appearing there. But you don't see that anywhere in Jerusalem, in Israel, in Europe, and so on. Okay, you might see it a little bit in Greece, but in Greece and in Rome and so on, yes, it does translate. When they started looking at, for example, the Temple of Oset, and they started replicating the Temple of Oset in Greece and in Rome and so on. But those were now the Europeans replicating the structures in Kemet. But I'm talking about, for example, the Jews specifically, because they're the ones who allegedly built pyramids. Now, where is that architecture, that signature in their place where they are said to be based? You don't see it. You don't see it with the Arabs. You don't see it with the Asians. You don't see it anywhere, okay? Now, it can't be true, therefore, that Jews built pyramids, okay? It cannot. By the time, for example, when Alexander the Horrible invaded Kemet, okay, the Ptolemaic era started. And when the Ptolemaic era started, Ptolemy Philadelphus was the first person who then assisted the Jews from taking the ancient writings of our ancestors from papyri, from the stones, from the graves, the tombs, and so on, to then make up the Jewish Bible. You understand? So when he takes that, you need to understand, therefore, that from that point followed the Christian Bible. So it started with the Jewish Bible, taken from our writings, okay? And then from there onward followed the Christian Bible, and Islam came much later. Now, when you look at these people copying the works of our ancestors, it then follows logic as to the reason for which they started attacking our ancestors and attacking the continent at large. We lived differently. We brought civilization to the world. I mean, we even taught Europeans how to bathe. They couldn't even bath. And one would think that that is like the basic thing, the most basic thing that anybody can do. I mean, what's so difficult about jumping in the river and you're clean? Simple, simple. Standing under a waterfall and you're clean. It's a simple thing. You know, I think it was Queen Victoria, one of the queens, used to brag about being the cleanest woman in all of Europe. But she bathed she bathed once every 3 months. And yet she said she was the cleanest person in Europe. Now that tells you a story. We taught these people how to bath. We civilized all of Europe twice, not once, twice. And we are civilizing Europe even now. These post-colonial pacts that are signed with our so-called independent states, particularly with France, we are still civilizing Europe right now as we speak. We are civilizing the rest of the world right now as we speak. Why is it that you have people who allegedly come to invest on this continent? And they keep the continent in poverty, not because Africans are poor people, but if you keep us in poverty, you are able to control the harvesting of these minerals without us taking part in that. I mean, who owns the mines? Who owns the factories? Who owns the farms? You see what I'm saying? So there has then been that aspect. Now I want to get onto a very sensitive subject, that of racism, because we tend to think of racism as the hatred of white people, or rather the hatred of black people by white people. And I'm saying racism goes a lot deeper than that, okay? When white people started coming out of their caves in Europe, Caucasus Mountains and whatever, and then they formed into the Rus, into the Celts, the Gauls and whatever, these tribes of theirs that they had, they then realized that, hang on a minute, but Africa has moved so far. And then they started learning how to sail the seas like Africans were doing. So Christopher Columbus was not the first person to sail the seas, not by any means, okay? When they started learning, oh, okay, we can also sail the seas, they realized that everywhere they landed, the people there were of dark colored skin, melanated skin, carbon skin, okay? Like yours and mine. And it became worse when they started having interracial relations with Africans or people of color. And they realized that they were not recreating white children. Children still looked like us, even if they looked they became of a fairer skin, but they were still our pigmentation, they contained melanin, they contained other traits, genetic traits that were linked to Africans. So then they started realizing that if these people were to come over into Europe, then Europe would cease to exist, or rather Europeans would cease to exist. So then the fight for extinction started. Now it's about white genetic survival, okay? We as African people have never had in our history, right through the continent, we have never ever had the need to proclaim our superiority. Because if you feel superior, you don't need to shout and make a noise about it. Why is it that Europeans always have to try and show and tell everybody, we are superior, we are superior, we are, it happens even now. It happens even now. We are superior. Why do they have to shout that they are superior? Are they really feeling superior? Are they really superior? I mean, our ancestors did not stop with the pyramids. The genius continued. Because even right to this day, the GPS that you are using on your phone is invented by an African. Okay? In our surgeries, The implements that our surgeons used were invented by Africans. Imhotep, the father of medicine, not Hippocrates. Hippocrates could never have been the father of medicine. He studied medicine in Kemet, 2,000 years after the death of Imhotep, who is the father of medicine. So it started this jealousy, this wanting to fight for survival. And these are facts. I'm not talking hatred here. I'm talking facts. I'm not saying let's go out and hate white people. But I'm saying this is the truth. We acknowledge the truth. We know it. We study it. You as a white person, if you are listening or watching, acknowledge it. Acknowledge that this is the weakness of your ancestors. It's got nothing to do with, I'm not preaching hatred. I'm not saying let's hate white people. But I'm saying let's now right the wrong and let's understand the truth for what it is. And let us return to the greatness of our ancestors as Africans. So you understand, therefore, how this hatred of Africans started, this racism. And then they made sure that the racism is perpetuated in every aspect of life. Okay, so how do they do that? They make sure that it's in the education, it's in the entertainment, it's in the economy, it's in politics, it's in war, it's in sex, it's in religion, it's in, all of these aspects, it's in law. Even if you look at our law, Roman Dutch law, why are we living under Roman Dutch law? I'm neither Roman nor Dutch. Why must I subscribe to Roman Dutch law? It doesn't make sense to me. Right now, it has messed up it has messed up our indigenous marriages. We now must look at our indigenous unions through the eyes of white people. I'll give you an example. The Roman Dutch law allows for people to cohabit to an extent that when they separate, you start talking about whose assets are whose. In our indigenous law, you are not allowed to cohabit. It's prohibited. You cannot cohabit. You need to pay your dues, and not pay your dues because you are buying. You need to pay your dues because you are putting together that union. Uthenga ubuhlobo noma wakha ubuhlobo. And ubuhlobo is not between two individuals. It's a union of families. What happens with Europeans? They meet each other somewhere, they fall in love, they go to home affairs, and they come back to tell their parents, "Mom, meet my wife." So it's between two individuals. It's unheard of among Africans. Akwenziwa. You cannot do that because you are breaking so many laws, not only in the physical realm, but also in the spiritual realm. That is why a white wedding means nothing to us Africans. So when you start understanding, that is why I'm saying know thyself. When you start understanding all of these things and understanding who you are as an African person, then you begin to understand, okay, where am I as a person in the bigger scheme of things? Where am I in terms of indigenous law, indigenous practice? Where am I if I meet a girl? What do I do in order to make sure that I don't contravene, in order to make sure ukuthi angibangcolisi kuloya muzi, angibangcolisi ithongo labo, angcolisi ithongo lami. I don't mess with the spirits. My grandfather used to say to me, you cannot be in the flesh and attempt to fight the spirit. Awukwazi ukuthi uyinyama ule nomoya. Doesn't happen. So you've got to then take cognizance of the fact that there are spirits of ancestors, the great spirits of the universe that are out there that you need to pay homage to, that you need to respect, that you need to always make sure ukuthi you observe them and you observe the laws that govern them and that govern life in general. So that's how the hatred started, and that's why it started.
Yo, such deep teachings. I'm just soaking in with this wisdom. It's so powerful. Thank you for just like opening our minds to understand more on what's happening. I'm thinking of this from like a psychological perspective, just because that's the training I received um, that right now our society, as you're mentioning, it's decaying. We are working with just the opposite of what is original and what is natural for us African people, because every part of how we do things right now is not how our ancestors did things, right? And it's this decaying of the original blueprint that is creating what we call the ego pathologies that we see in our community, right? Where now the ego, the identity of an African, it's rife, it's distorted, it's contaminated, it's broken into pieces that are not the original blueprint. And when we're talking about even indigenous marriages and the original blueprint, we don't see that in our community now because all this has been contaminated. And the origin, once again, is also about the superiority complex of other races and them feeling the need to come and prove that they are superior, right? And this is the events that were happening, the history that you mentioned was happening here in the physical, right? I'm wondering if there is a spiritual aspect to it as well. Is there a particular reason why this played out this way from a spiritual perspective? And yes, I'll come back to the DNA question after that. Yes, let me stop here.
Okay, when we look at spirituality, Africans have always been spiritual. Now, this goes all the way. If you were to read the research work done by the late great Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, he scientifically conducted studies. Even Dr. Theophilo Benga, scientifically proving that, for example, the so-called ancient Egyptians were African. Okay, but that's now the DNA part that I think you're alluding to. But I just want to link it because it's kind of connected in a way. I want to come back to the spirituality aspect of it. The first people to write anything down were the Twa people. And I'm linking it back to Sheikh Anta Diop because Sheikh Anta Diop proved through his research, his scientific research, that the first people on the continent and on the planet were the Twa people from the Great Lakes region. And from there on, we spread right up until the south. We still have Abatwa right here in the south, okay? We have Abatwa in the north, we have them in the east, we have them in the west, right through the continent of Africa, okay? So these were the first people to write anything spiritual, okay? Now, this was almost 1 million years before Kemet came into being. The Twa people started writing theosophy. And that theosophy then went into Kemet as well when Kemet developed. I think by the first king of Kemet, King Nama. When Nama started the kingdom, the pre-dynastic era in Kemet, these writings then were incorporated. That is why you will find also statues and reliefs of the Twa people in the walls and in the tombs, in the pyramids in Kemet, because our ancient ancestors paid homage to the Twa people because they were part of that civilization. Our ancient ancestors paid homage to every person on the continent who came to Kemet in one way or another. It's either they represented you by way of palm trees, so they would erect huge palm tree pillars and so on and so forth. So they did a number of things to pay homage to everybody, to make sure that we are all represented in Kemet, okay? Over and above that, the language itself, Meduneta, in Kemet, is composed of all the languages, the indigenous languages on the continent. So even if you are speaking Setswana, you can understand Meduneta. You're speaking isiZulu, you can understand Meduneta. You're speaking Lingala, you can understand Meduneta. You're speaking Lozi, you can understand Meduneta. You know, every indigenous language, all right, is represented. So when we talk about the question of spirituality. It goes hand in glove with culture, with practice, with, you know, now there is a debate as to whether culture comes first before spirituality or spirituality came. But I would say this: spirituality and religion are two different things. Spirituality has always been there, okay? Then comes the culture, and the culture then informs the religion. So once you decide in terms of your culture, you then decide, because religion is primarily about ritual. So you decide the ritual you're going to perform, the ritualistic aspect. But religion is not only ritual. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not saying religion is just ritual. But what I am saying is a greater part of religion is about ritual. But in order for you to understand what ritual you're going to partake in or formulate, you need to understand what is your culture, what is your way of life before you come to that point. So, and in order for you to understand what is your culture, you need to be cognizant of who you are as a person. What is your spiritual connection to yourself, to your relatives, to your children, to your parents, to the land, to the sky, to the tree, and so on. And therefore, you formulate culture in that regard. So you see, now we're working backwards. So you see how spirituality is interwoven in everything that we do. It is interwoven in our thoughts, in our deeds, in our lives, in our music, in our sorrows, in everything of us. That is why, therefore, we come back to this maxim that I used earlier on. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. It comes back to that. You see? Yeah.
Wow. Yes, definitely. It brings a full picture. I like that differentiation of that spirituality is always there, and then culture comes, and then religion. I've never thought of it that way, which makes sense because, yes, religion is the organizing, people coming together to organize how they will practice that spirituality, and they create a culture from that together, which um, which also extends to why our African spirituality or traditions related to our spiritual connections, our spiritual healing practices has also been distorted, right? And how currently we have a great fear of our African spirituality, which then becomes a fear of the self, essentially, because that's your true self. You are spirit, right? So there is this great fear of the self of African people that has trickled down from slavery and colonization up to this current time that we are in, right? And when we are doing this process of knowing the self, and we are doing it as an individual at a personal level, what are the steps that we can begin to do? I mean, other than understanding our history, what else can we do to embody the culture, the spirituality, the true history of our ancestors as African people?
I think the first thing to do is to be simplistic. And by that, I mean to say, start within your area of influence, your immediate area. You know, be the change you wish to see. So it doesn't help to say, I would love for Africa to unite. But in your space, you're creating divisions. Divisions with your wife, divisions with your children, your family, divisions with your friends, divisions at work, divisions, you know, you're always creating divisions because that has a ripple effect. People next to you see you create the divisions. And because we are creatures of, we are products of our surroundings, we tend to subconsciously pick on these bad habits. And we look at gender-based violence, for example, how that spreads like a wildfire. It started by one person lifting his hand to a woman. Somebody else sees it, a child sees it, grows up thinking this is what we need to do. They lifted their hand to a woman. A neighbor sees it thinking, okay, this is how I need to deal with my wife. He lifts his hand, and it spreads on that way. Whereas when you start saying, how do I live a righteous life? Remember, I talked about Ubuntu. Come back to the principles of Ma'at, the principles of Ubuntu, self-writing, where you say, have I done the right thing today? And it's not about reciting the principles. A lot of people are into recitation. I know the 42 laws of Ma'at, therefore I recite them. I have not stolen. I have not shamed my ancestors. I have not spoken ill of another. I have not interfered with another's wife or coveted another's wife. I have not. It's one thing to recite them, but it is a completely different matter to live them. Can you come home and start retracing your steps throughout the day and say, you actually ask yourself the question, have I hurt somebody today? Have I told a lie today? Have I coveted somebody's wife today? Have I stolen today? Have I desecrated my ancestors today? Have I spoken ill of another today? You ask yourself these questions. And where you find the answer being no or in the negative, then you start saying, I need to make that right. So the next day you begin a process of saying, my neighbor, my friend, my brother, I have hurt you. It was not my intent, or even if it was my intent, but I don't know what on earth overcame me. I need to overcome my animalistic self, because that's where it starts. You hurt your neighbor because you cannot overcome your animalistic nature. You get jealous. Jealousy is your animalistic instinct. You need to overcome that. Because once you overcome it, you are happy with your neighbor's progress. Because then it means you understand that their progress is your success. Because in the spiritual realm, you can then connect. Because if he's happy, that positive energy spills over, it generates positivity right around you, even within your own environment. And therefore, you begin to generate that positivity, and you move forward into the spiritual realm now. So these feelings of jealousy and hatred, these are animalistic traits. So Ma'at or Ubuntu brings you back to that realization, to you asking yourself the question, have I done the right thing today? It's got nothing to do with who saw you or didn't see you. You might meet your neighbor's wife somewhere in a hotel. Nobody sees you, but you see yourself. Your spirit sees you. Your ancestors see you. Their ancestors see you. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now, you are not only just lying and fooling yourself, but you are fooling your ancestors as well. More than that, you are actually disrespecting your ancestors. You are shaming your ancestors. That is why when the law says, have I shamed my ancestors? Have or you can use it in the positive uh, uh, phrase to say, I will not shame my ancestors. You will not shame them. How? Because you will not be busy coveting somebody else's wife. And just digress a little bit. I want to put on this aspect whilst we're talking about women. I want to put this point across because I don't want it to seem as though I am being chauvinistic. I don't want to use the word patriarchy, because patriarchy and matriarchy are terms which have their own respective places, and they have nothing to do with being chauvinistic and abusive. But be that as it may, when we talk about women, we are not talking about women because we think we are superior to them. On the contrary, we talk about women even beyond equality. We don't even say we are equal, okay? But we talk about equity rather than equality, okay? Because we are made differently. But being different doesn't mean one is more important than the other. But we are also complementary. Women have their role to play. And I, as a man, would not be here if it were not for a woman, whether I like it or not, unless a tea bag gave birth to me or something. But I cannot say I am proud to be a man without the presence of a woman. So in actual fact, who is God? Woman is God. Who brought me here?
Yeah.
Woman brought me here. So who is God? Woman is God. And I say that without any fear, without hesitation. Okay? Now, when we understand that, then you start beginning to understand why you should never ever raise your hand against a woman. Woman is God. Who in their right minds raises their hand against God? Think about it.
Yeah.
So this is all part of know thyself. Understand who you are. Understand these concepts. Okay. So I just wanted to put this one up here so that when we talk about women, it's in context. People understand that we are not talking from a chauvinistic perspective. It takes a woman to make you a man. In my indigenous space, as a Zulu man, I am not a man unless I am married to a woman. Okay? Uma siya emakhaya, I will not be able to sit with married men and share the calabash with them. Okay? Even if I have gray hair, if I have not been married, I am not a man. So if it takes a woman to make me a man, how great is a woman? Uma sithi umuntu wesifazane uyingane, akayona ingane yakho wena muntu wesilisa. She is not your child. Because now akuwona umuzi wakho, umuzi wabaphansi. If your father is alive, it is the house that you are building, even if it is your money, is your grandfather's house. Your house will be built by your children or your grandchildren. So she's not your child. She's the child of your ancestors. So when we say a woman is a child, she's not your child. She's in partnership with you. And that is the misconception that we need to get rid of. When people start thinking women are children. No, no, no. She is not your child. When you have nothing. You are building your father or your grandfather's house. It's not yours. So how then do you begin to even take ownership of her? You don't own her. She is coming here to help you to build your grandfather's house. So that is how important women are. And when we start understanding this, we will start understanding that there's no need for gender-based violence. There is no need for disrespecting women. You can never be a king unless you take a queen. It's that simple. We see it even in Kemet. You will never see a statue of a king outside of his queen in Kemet. Okay? You will never see a king in South Africa, in Swaziland, Eswatini, or any other place be a king without a woman. A king must always take a woman, must take a queen. Because who advises you? Who advises you? It is the queen who advises you. But you'll forgive me for digressing, but I just think that with everything that is happening, we kind of have to digress and get into the business of understanding how great women are and how much we need women. Life without a woman is not life, it does not exist. So when we understand that, then we begin to understand how to live properly with women, whether it is our girl children, our mothers, our aunts, our grandmothers, our wives, our sisters. You understand? So that is why I've digressed a little bit in terms of this. But going back to the question that you asked, it is important, therefore, that we start with our circle of influence. You start with yourself. Have I done the right thing? Before you even look at um, understanding history, understanding pre-colonial history, understanding who are our ancestors before we were attacked and defiled and enslaved and so on and so forth. When you start doing the right thing in terms of Ubuntu right now, it will then lead you into the path of understanding the correct history. Because if you do not know who you are and you do not know who your ancestors were, you will believe anything your enemy tells you. Remember that until you hear or until the lion is able to tell his story, the hunter remains the hero. So for as long as we don't know who we are in truth, we will believe whatever nonsense the colonialists tell us. They'll tell us we were inferior. They'll tell us we didn't know how to write. It was Emperor Constantine who actually sent the earth or the world into a 200-year, well, it was a 2,000-year period of darkness. Okay, a period of what they would call the dark era, the medieval era, where people were not allowed to read and write. Okay, our ancestors were able to read and write long before Constantine. Okay, long before the Europeans came out of their caves. Now, when Constantine came, he made sure that nobody else can read or write. That is why the Bible today doesn't make sense, because now we can read the damn thing. It's no longer because the priests are supposed to be reading it. Now we are reading this as a book. Now we are saying, we read, it says, God made Adam. He put him to sleep. From his rib, he created Eve. Beautiful story. I mean, I can relate to that. It's beautiful. All right. Adam and Eve, there was that story about Adam being enticed, or was it Eve who was enticed in terms of the forbidden fruit, and then she enticed Adam, who then ate this forbidden fruit, and they realized that they were naked, whatever, until they eventually engaged in intercourse, and they started having children. So they had two children, Cain and Abel. So our understanding in terms of that story is there were four people in the world. Then Cain killed his brother Abel. Okay? Then it brings it back to three people. So there were three people in the world. Cain was banished from his home. He went wherever he went and came back after a couple of years. His parents welcomed him. There's still three people in the world. Then the most baffling part begins for me. It says Cain got married. And I thought, wait a minute, but it was Adam, Eve, and Cain, who is the son of Adam and Eve. Who is Cain marrying? Now the story doesn't make sense. Now, and all the stories in the Bible are like that. In fact, not just in the Bible. In the Quran, it's the same nonsense. In the Torah, it's the same nonsense. Okay? And I'll call it nonsense because it is. Sue me if you like. I don't care. Show me a grave of any person mentioned in the Bible, and I will become a Christian the very next moment. You can't find the grave of Abraham, Moses, no single person in the Bible. And we know two things about Europeans, by the way. If they dig up a grave of a black person, they put him in a museum. If they dig up a grave of a white person, they create a monument. You cannot find a monument or a tomb of anyone in the Bible. Let's leave that aside. Let's talk about Solomon, who had 1,000 wives. Surely we should be seeing the descendants of Solomon to this day. Where are they? Who are they? So we mustn't concern ourselves with things that have got nothing to do with us and with our story as Africans. Let's come back to the real thing. What did our ancestors do? When did they do it? And how did they do it? Why did they do it? Do you understand what I'm saying? Why are we forsaking what our ancestors have done? They call us demons. You know what I mean? You go and you do something for your ancestors. Now, if they are calling your ancestors demons, does that not mean that you are a demon waiting to happen? You're going to be an ancestor one day, aren't you? So are you a demon waiting to happen? Why are we stuck with this nonsense? You see what I'm saying? So let us come back. Start with your area of influence. Do the things which you know in your heart are right, righteous living. Forget about who has seen you, who hasn't seen you. Look at yourself. You are seeing you. Your ancestors are seeing you. Okay? Your conscience is seeing you. Have I done the right thing? And from that point on, you will be spiritually led to understanding that you need to dig up your history, your true history. Okay? Forget about this pie in the sky nonsense that came with the Europeans and whatever. They take our stories, pervert them, and then sell them to us as our own, which is not true. I've never seen or heard of any ancestor of ours in the Bible, in the Quran, because these are not of ours. Somebody was saying to me the other day, yeah, but Africans didn't write anything. And I'm saying, let's go back into history. And I'm not just talking about history, I'm talking about scientific records. Let's go into archaeology. Let's go into anthropology. Let's go into the work by Sheikh Anta Diop, Theophilo Benga, Ivan van Sertima, Yusuf Ben Yokanen, Anthony Browder, you name them. That we have tremendous scholars, Mwata Ashby. We have tremendous scholars who have done tremendous work, who are teaching us this. Let's go back there, dig up that history. But before we go there, write yourself. Write yourself, start with your area of influence. In as much as you can learn a bad habit, you can also learn a good habit. In as much as you can unlearn a bad habit, you can unlearn a good habit. The idea is not to unlearn a good habit, it's to learn the good habit and unlearn the bad habit.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. This truth, you're speaking truth, Mkhulu. My heart is like, yes, yes, yes. I'm very excited right now. I don't even know where to begin. But I want to take this time to actually invite everyone who's watching to start asking questions. If you have any questions, if you would like Mkhulu to expand on something he mentioned, I know that this was like an education. So I'm processing everything that you've been saying, and I really appreciate it because it's really affirming also my interest, and really the reason why I'm doing this show is for this particular reason, for us to return to our knowledge, the true knowledge, our indigenous knowledge, our ancient African knowledge, so that we can do this reclamation, reparation within the self first, and then it will trigger out into our community, into our continent. And as I have so many thoughts, honestly, on everything that you said. And so I'm going to actually take some time to think about what I want to say, and jump into the question here as I process everything you're saying. Yeah. Okay. So we have a question here from Gogo Taz. Hello, Gogo. Thank you for joining us. So she's saying, great teachings. Thank you. I appreciated the point on eloping and cohabiting and how critical it is for us to get together in matrimony according to African rights. I was actually feeling that you need to just come back and teach us everything with sacred marriages, Mkhulu, just as an FYI, because I was learning a lot when you started to speak about this. But she would like you to elaborate further on the distortions that we are causing through cohabitation.
Okay. Now, let me go back into the rites of passage before we get to cohabiting or marriage, indigenous marriage. Okay. Now, children develop, give or take, in stages of 7 years. Okay. When they are 7 years of age, they enter different developmental stage. When they're 14, they enter different developmental stage. When they're around 21, you know this. It's part of psychology as well. So I'm not talking about something completely foreign. You understand this. Our ancient ancestors also understood this. So when a child enters into stages, there are certain rites that are performed for this child, ushering them into the new stage of their life, because it is important that the child grows into that particular stage. When you are, for example, a boy and you enter manhood, you can't be doing boyish things. You can't be playing boyish games. You can't, you are at a different phase of your life. Life becomes a bit more serious. You have responsibilities now. You should be behaving in a certain way. You should be, doing certain things, and not doing other things, and so on and so forth. You should be at a position where you are ready to take a wife. You are ready to build your father's house, as it were. So we need to go through these rites of passage, and in as much as we do them for girls, we also do them for boys. Okay. For example, when a girl, a girl child, a very young girl starts getting into her periods, ngesintu wenzelwa umhlonyane, uyancamiswa, and that is a rite of passage, because we need to celebrate the fact that she is entering into that phase of her life. Okay, she has now gotten her first period. That obviously does not mean she must now go and take a boyfriend and whatever, we are happy as parents, as the community, that we understand that this girl is growing a normal growth, and that she, by virtue of her first period, she promises life, because that's what it means. She's at the stage where her body is readying itself to give life. Okay. Likewise with the boy, we also celebrate and we usher the boy into that rite of passage. Now, when we do all of these, we start understanding that marriage is also a rite of passage. Like I said, you cannot be a man until you take a wife. It is a rite of passage for a boy to enter manhood. Otherwise, you remain a perpetual boy until you pass away, until you transcend. Okay? Now, with this rite of passage in terms of marriage, when you take a wife, let's go back a little bit in terms of the indigenous process. You see a girl, you like her, you decide, hey, I want to marry this girl. So you approach your family and you say, you will either speak through your elder brother or through your uncle, because we respected our parents so much that we felt that it was disrespectful to talk to them directly about such matters. It was not about being afraid of them, it was out of respect. And we had institutions, and these institutions are the ones which helped us to do certain things. For example, Your maternal uncle is an institution. There are things that only he can do, that he's supposed to do. No one else must do them. Likewise with your paternal uncle. Likewise with your maternal aunt, your paternal aunt, and so on. That is why kuhlukileke ngesintu. Kunobabekazi, kunomalume, kunobaba omdala, kunosokhaya, and so on. These are institutions that we are talking about, and they have specific roles. Now, modernity and westernization has eroded these institutions. And as a result, we're finding ourselves lost. Now, when you get married, uma usuganwa manje, noma usugana mangabe umuntu wesifazane usuyalwa abangani. Find your friends in your wedding reception. Hey, indoda iyaphekelwa, wazini ngendoda ezokuyala. It's not their duty, it's not their place. You know, mfowethu umphathe kahle kumakoti, akuyona indawo yakho. You are a friend, you are my friend, you are not my father. It's not your place to be giving that advice. So now we need to go back and say, how do these things happen? Why did they happen the way that they happened? There was a reason why. Because uma I have taken advice from a friend of mine, and then I have an argument with my wife, what type of advice do you think my friend is going to give me in terms of resolving that issue? A lot of the time, the first thing that will be said is, uyabheda umfazi. Akekho ozokubuyisa ozothi, but hang on a minute. These things do happen, but you must learn how to build. Funeka uzehlise njengomuntu wesilisa, wazi ukuthi uyilalele lento ayikhulumayo and find a way of bringing her to the mind that you have. If you are thinking a particular way and you are thinking what it is right, it is what is right for the family. Usher her into that realization as well. Don't bully her into it, but make her understand ukuthi cha la ekhaya kungoba kuwukuthi. Do you see what I'm saying? Walk with her in your journey. Don't walk in the front and expect her to follow. Walk with her hand in hand. She is there to help you to build. You know, she's not your servant. Uze ukuzokulekelela ukwakha umuzi wakini. Now let's go back. We are talking about these rites of passages, and we're saying marriage is a rite of passage. Now, what are you doing by cohabiting? You are foregoing that rite of passage. But I want to take it a step back, actually. We were talking about the rites of passage of a girl. Now, let's talk about virgin maidens. Virgin maidens, their bodies are pure, in as much as the boys' bodies are pure, but specifically virgin maidens, by virtue of the fact that they are the ones who ultimately bring life forward. Do you understand? They incubate a seed, and 9 months later, it comes out as a beautiful baby with life. Do you see what I'm saying? So they are very important for that reason. And for that reason, they're also important because virgin maidens can pray for the rain. Okay? Virgin maidens can enter into the cowshed or isibaya. Okay? Isibaya yila kuhlala khona amathongo ala ekhaya, amakhehla ala ekhaya egcekeni. Okay? Leyo ndawo ayingenwa omama nabanye abantu besifazana asebengaphelele, kodwa ingenwa amatshitshi. You understand? Now, there's a specific reason for that. And it is not to say ukuthi omama abangeni because there's something wrong with them. But it is because uma umuntu esewumama, the kind of power that they now possess can be, it can overpower yourself as a man. So women have tremendous power. And it is not that we seek to control that power, but we seek to understand ukuthi how does isebenza kanjani kuphi. So and that is why even to this day you will understand that as an athlete you must abstain before you go and you play your sport. You abstain from sexual activity before you play sport, because that energy gets drained from you during sexual intercourse. That's how powerful a woman is. Now, it's all of these things that we are talking about. Now, when we are talking about being in a position where you understand ukuthi awuziphethe uphethwe, you are a spiritual being having a human experience. You understand ukuthi uma uthatha ubuntombi from the virgin maiden, okay? So you take her virginity away. By so doing, you are defiling that house from where this girl is born, from where she comes. You are defiling that house. You are defiling the respect. You are disrespecting the girl's father. But not only are you disrespecting him, you are disrespecting him, yes, because he's the head of the house, but you are not only disrespecting him, you are disrespecting the ancestors of that house. Not only are you disrespecting the ancestors of that house, you are disrespecting your own ancestors. You are embarrassing them. That you take upon. Now, in our indigenous circle, that is why I always ask people, Guti, when we discuss indigenous matters, take off your Eurocentric cap. Because here we don't think Eurocentric. Eurocentrism doesn't have a place when we talk about matters of African spirituality or indigenous matters for that matter, of any kind, whether it's indigenous law, matters like this, marriage, and so on and so forth. We do not want to think in terms of Eurocentric thought. Take off your cap, uyibekele. Sikhuluma isintu ke manje. Masikhuluma isintu ke. Let's get into the thick of it. A girl, no matter how old she is either under her father or her husband. And when I say she's under her husband, she's not under him per se. She is under so she's under the ancestors of the family into which she is married. You see, so even if ephuma eyohlala yedwa, she's now working, she's got her own flat. That flat is in essence her father's flat. Do you see what I'm saying? Yes, it is in essence her father's flat. It is not hers. So she can't just do willy-nilly. And it is because she is that important, not because she is submissive or subjugated. No. You see, there's a difference. So we need to understand. Take off your Eurocentric cap. Ubeke lapha kude. Sikhuluma isintu manje. Sikhuluma isilungu. Sikhuluma isintu, sikhuluma izinto zesintu. Now, masikhuluma izinto zesintu, let's get back into yesintu. How it was intended, why it was intended that way. Now, we are talking about the importance of a girl child. You take her virginity. You disrespect, like I said, umnumzane, amathongo alapha kuloya muzi nethongo lakho. You have now created ukungcola, which is you defiled yourself, your ancestors, the ancestors of that house, the man of the house, right? Understanding what I said, intombazane is either under the authority of her father or her husband. And it's not her husband per se, it is the family into which she marries, right? Now, when you have that in mind, you understand, Uguti, this is the reason why, no matter how old a girl is, she does not have consent. Ngesilungu angithi kuthiwa uma isena 18 usengazi better njengesiginci. Angithi she can sleep with whatever boy she wants and so on and so forth. It's consensual. She can consent. Ngesintu, she does not have consent. And she does not have consent because it is taken away from her. She must understand her role ukuthi lo muntu umsebenzi wakhe ukuyokwakha umuzi, so akufanele aziphathe noma kanjani. But also nawe, you as the man, you are the guardian. It is your responsibility to make sure you do not cause that type of a problem. That is the reason why uma usuphuce intombi ubuntombi bayo kuba wena ohlawulayo. Intombazana ayihlawuli lutho, because you have taken away, you have neglected your responsibility. You have taken away your birthright of being the protector and the guardian. You are not protecting her because she's weak. You're protecting her because she's important. That's a vast difference right there. So we don't protect women because we think they can't protect themselves and they're weak. No, we protect them because they are important. Let's understand that. Wow. Take off your Eurocentric cap. Uyibekele. Asikhulumi isilungu la sikhuluma isintu. Thatha ikepisi lakho uliphose emsamo. Asifuni ukulibona ikepisi lesingisi lesilungu. Asikhulumi isilungu. Sikhuluma ngesintu. Masikhuluma ngesintu ke, let's get into the thick of it. Okay, because now already I know there are people who are saying, yeah, but she's got consent, this and the other. You know, the law doesn't allow. Oh, wait, what law are you talking about? Sikhulumi isintu. Asikhulumi Roman Dutch law. I'm not Roman, I'm not Dutch. Ngumzulu ngizokhuluma into engiyaziyo yakithi yesithu sakithi sesiZulu. You understand? I will not mix the two. So let's not mix things. Now, when you understand that part, then you begin to understand the reason why it is important ukuthenga ubuhlobo. Awuthengi ubuhlobo because you want to buy a punch bag that you're going to put in your house. Umuntu wesifazana akaphakanyisela isandla. If you know the importance of a woman, you do not lift your hand to her under any circumstances whatsoever. It is your responsibility, no matter how angry she might be, it's your responsibility to bring her, sit her down and say, love, you have every right to be upset. Ngicela kodwa silungise. Okay? Uze uxolise noma ngabe right, uxolise. Why? Because she's important. Why? Because uyena okwakhela umuzi. Ngitheni sithatha ikepisi lesilungu siliphose kude. Asikhulumi isilungu, asikhulumi isintu, right? So, masikhuluma isintu ke, let's get into the thick of isintu. Sikhohlwe isilungu. Now, I am saying it's a rite of passage. You now understand why marriage is a rite of passage. Uzokwakhela umuzi. Then we look at how that process begins to take shape. Kuqalwa ke ngelobolo. Okay? And I don't want to talk necessarily about 11 cows because we all understand how that came into being, the price that was set. Wawufike ukhiphe lokhu onakho ngoba wakha ubuhlobo. Kodwa kulokho onakho kuneyinkomo ke vese ezinomsebenzi wazo. Kufike kube inkomo kababa. In fact, inkomo kababa yesibili kuqala ngenkomo kanina. Okay, lekuthiwa ingqotho. Okay, sikhuluma isintu by the way. So abantu ke ngiyazi sebeyabaleka manje ngoba ngikhuluma isintu. Cha, akukho nhlamba ngikhuluma isintu. Right? Igama layo ke leyo nkomo kuthiwa ingqotho. Bese kuba inkomo kayise. Okay, bese ziyalandelana ngokushiyana kwazo, khona yomqhoyiso, khona ingqobo masondo. No, ingqobo masondo imbuzi. Kukhona ngizozikhumbula amagama azo. It's just that now zinamagama. There are about 6 of them actually. Okay? Lezi ezinye azinawo amagama. Kusuke sekuyinkomo nje. And that is why it doesn't make sense, because when Europeans started interfering with cultural practice to determine the price of 11 cows, things started going wrong. Now we have about 5 cows. Ezingenamagama, esingawazi umsebenzi wazo. Lezi eziyisithupha, we can tell you ukuthi inkomo yokuthi, inkomo yokuthi, inkomo yokuthi, inkomo yokuthi. Do you understand? Zinomsebenzi wazo, inkomo nenkomo inomsebenzi wayo. Lezi ezinye asizazi ezani. So siqhamuka sesithi 11 cows. But lo 11 manje has been interfered with because it is predetermined by somebody else who is not even African for that matter. Okay? Asiphumeke lapho. Sila. Ukhipha ilobolo. Uma ukhipha ilobolo, You are saying ngifisa ukwakha ubuhlobo nayi imbali engiyibonile engiyithandile nabakithi abayithandile. Okay, by the way, you are not doing this yourself. You do it through your delegation. So you uzokhetha omalume or a group of elders that you trust ukuthi kube yibona abayokukhulumela bayokucelela ubuhlobo, because it's an important thing. You can't do, you are not, it's the same as, for example, I'll give you an example now. Before a magistrate in a court of law, okay, let me use, for example, a high court. Okay, before the court of law in the high court, you have your normal lawyer and you would have an advocate. Unless your lawyer has rights, specific rights to appear before a judge, he does not have the authority. He must speak through the advocate will face the judge. Okay, that's just the simplest example I can give at this moment, but one that people can relate to. But why is it that an advocate faces a judge? Okay, similarly here, you do not have rights to go uyokhuluma nomkhwe wakho noma nomkhwekazi wakho. Kufanele kukhethwe abantu who are going to appear on your behalf because of that respect. So now relate the example, okay? So your delegation will go and negotiate on your behalf. And they will bring back a reply, ukuthi bayavuma ukuthi kuhamba kanje, and so on. And uyonikela lokho, hayi lento yokuthi manje sekuthiwa sayifundisa lengane. Wo, kahleni bakwethu. That akugona ukuthenga ubuhlobo lobo. Sekukudayiselana ke manje. Now we are buying the person. We are no longer building ubuhlobo. As a father, it is my duty to raise my children. And I will not charge anyone else for that. So uma sengishadisa our daughter, I will not say I educated her. It is my duty to educate her. Kanti funeka afundiswe ubani? Funeka akhuliswe ubani? Funeka ondliwe ubani? It's my duty. I cannot delegate or pass on that responsibility to somebody else to pay for. That is why iy'ngane zethu zi-abuseka, because lo mfana uzocasuka manje ukuthi ngakukhokhela imali, ngakukhiphela iy'nkomo. So we are killing our indigenous practices by doing them in the incorrect manner, in the incorrect spirit. Okay, so we must do that properly. Sakhe ubuhlobo ngendlela ekuyiyona sikhiphe ilobolo. But akugcini lapho. Akusho ukuthi uma ukhipha ilobolo sekumngakho loyo, no. Awukaqali nokuqala. Now you come into the section where usuyamkhehla-ke. Uma umkhehla-ke usumthwesa isicholo. Usuyabika manje. Njengoba umthwesa isicholo nje, useqala manje ukugqoka ngendlela ehlukile. Akaseqhephuli manje njengetshitshi. Afaka into eyimfisha. Akakwazi phela ukuveza labantu basemzini amathanga. Afuneka manje ahlonipheke. Yabona leyo nto. And sekuwukuthi nezinye iy'nsizwa seziyazi ukuthi laphayana ngokomthetho akufanele sishele. Asasheli laphayana. Loya muntu usezilungiselele ukuthi ayongena emzini. Nathi funeka sazi ukuthi sishelapha, sihambe sishela nje. You see what I'm saying? Sesihambe sishela manje, sishela ney'nkehli. Uyaphi kwinkehli iy'ntombi ziningi, amatshitshi amaningi. All right? Still though, she's not your woman. So that is our equivalent of an engagement, if I can put it that way. Uyamkhehla, right? Uma usumkhehlile-ke, then comes the day where usuthi-ke uyacaca-ke namhlanje, niyacacelana. Kodwa uyena kahle kahle ocacayo osezongena emagcekeni, right? Again. That process is not complete until kuphambaniswa iy'nhlangothi. So kunenkomo abamkhipha ngayo kubo. Bayihlaba leyo nkomo, ngenkathi beyihlaba leyo nkomo, bayiqaya phakathi, the half of that cow bamphelezela naye mase bemlethe emzini. So when they are bringing her over to her matrimonial home, that half of that cow comes with her, right? nani ngala nihlaba inkomo enimqhoyisa ngayo enimamukela ngayo egcekeni. When you do that, half of that cow goes with them, with your in-laws, okay? So that's the exchange. But still, that process is not complete. It's the beginning of the process, the exchange of the halves. Bamthathe-ke izalukwazi zala ekhaya zimthathe seziyomyala ebese zimchela ngenyongo. That process then says usengowala ekhaya. But remember ukuthi the time bemkhipha kubo nalo hlangothi lenkomo baye bamhlabela nembuzi yokumkhipha yokusho ukuthi-ke akase. That's why I tell our girl children ukuthi I'm trying to put it in English now, but in ngesizulu I would say to her, awuyena wami kodwa uyisihlobo sami. Awuyena wala ekhaya kodwa uyisihlobo sami. In other words, you are not mine here, but you will always be my relative, because indeed she is going to marry out and become the child of another household, but she will always forever be my relative. That does not stop. Okusho ukuthi-ke leyo mfana maseqala ezibona ukuthi uyinsizwa akeze la singene mina naye, because I have a duty to defend my daughter's honor no matter what, under any circumstances. Okay, it's not the responsibility of the police or the government. Touch my children, you face me as the father. It is my birthright. It's not given to me by government. You understand? That's the difference. But guys, here what I'm saying, you are giving this woman your surname. She is not your child. She is the child of your ancestors. She is your partner to help you to build the home of your ancestors. So wenziwe-ke umshado-ke lapho suphelele-ke mayesechelwe ngenyongo useyingane yala ekhaya, not yakho wena muntu wesilisa. Awuna ngane wena. Awuna ngane because awunamuzi. Umuzi akuwona owakho uzokwakhiwa abazukulu bakho. I hope I've answered the question. It's a bit of a complex one, but yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's all I have. I just kept saying, feeling and thinking, wow, I am speechless, because the nuance of language, understanding our culture, our tradition, our norms in the way that you just broke down is just, wow. That's all I can say. I've never really understood it this way, the way you just explained it. And it's just, it makes me want to go read even more and understand the, the rituals of our people and why we do them the way that we do them, and not project the English into what is being said, because that's what we do. We project the English and then take under, and then really take it as you are under the man. But just the way you just explained everything, it's just lifted such heaviness around some of the struggles I had with tradition and not understanding it. So thank you so much for explaining. Even when you were speaking in Zulu, which is not my native language, my spirit could understand. I was like, I hear what you are saying. So this has been so powerful. And I just believe we could go on forever. There are some comments here that I want to just read again. This is coming from Sembide. She's saying, I think she's responding to one of the things you said when you were explaining the conversation of marriage. Yes. So she's saying, thank you so much on the point of friends giving advice when it is not that place to give it or to be asked, because really they only take care of their friend's interest, and seldom will they have the family's interest. And as people, this is something that has become normal practice with the marriage structures. Thank you for highlighting and bringing clarity to it. Mkhulu, you brought so much clarity to so many things. I'm now even realizing how these bridal showers that we're having should not be happening the way we currently do them. Because what advice could I give someone who is about to enter marriage when I'm not a married woman. It's interesting.
Yep.
Yes, to really understand who we are, our history, the purpose of our our culture, our norms, our practices, and how they are steeped in such deep and spiritual wisdom and truth. And we miss this as the current generation. We just completely just totally miss this. So thank you so much. There's a lot of gratitude coming for you, Mkhulu, on Facebook as well. There is just, I think you blew our minds, and we don't have any questions anymore. But there is gratitude on the African history that you shared with us, and more than anything, affirming how powerful we are as Africans, how powerful we are as women. Until today, I didn't comprehend how powerful women are. I think I always say it because I do work with women, but today this was deeply affirmed and even explained in the context of our history, our culture, our practices. So thank you so much. Wow. Am I the only one who did wow? Yeah, this was so beautiful. We must have you again because there's so much to learn and so much to reclaim and to understand about the South and the African and us right now at this particular point in history, and understanding where we come from, what was stolen from us, and how it's important to reclaim that if we are intending to change all the inverted systems that currently exist in our continent. They will not happen through us just writing, changing laws, and just focusing on the external. It really comes back to the self, and it also comes back to us having the desire to truly understand where we come from, and the desire to release all the other learnings, teachings that we learned that without us understanding, they were oppressing and suppressing the African truth, the African history, the African way. Right. So this is what has come up for me, what I'm grateful for from this conversation. And as a way to wrap up, because I believe we could go deeper even more, for people who want to continue to just be in your space, learn more from you, how can they do that? How can they connect with you?
Okay, my email address is mhleli.linda. Mhleli, mhleli.linda at outlook.com. Mhleli.linda at outlook.com. On my, I'm afraid to, can I not give my phone number out just yet? Because
yes,
I have a very bad habit of not paying attention to my phone. So I don't want to find myself in trouble. I'm always busy doing a number of things. Rather let's communicate via email. And also with email, it's easier because then when I've sent you the email, at least I know I have replied to you. Yeah.
Wow. Yes. And you did share in the bio that I put in the website speaker page of this series that we're doing about initiatives that you're part of, that people can go and further engage with you as a member of the different institutions that you work with. It can be natural healing and the different Kemet societies, institutions that you're part of.
Yes,
right?
One of the institutions which is important to me and very dear to me, and I think that I've learned so much from it. It is the Great Empire of Kemet, led by Mkhulu Mhleli. I am a scholar, obviously, of Mkhulu Mhleli. So, uma ngizwa ngikhuluma kanje nokwazi ukuthi uthisha uye lo ongifundisayo. So I learned so much from Mkhulu and I'm forever grateful to him. Also, other teachers, Goku Nozipo Mutwa, Goku Rutendo, Ngara. There are so many others who are my mentors and teachers that I learned so much from. I know I cannot mention all of them right now, but it doesn't mean they are not thought of and they are not appreciated. They are indeed. And then I also work with three colleagues of mine and dear friends. We can be natural healing. I also learn a lot from those colleagues of mine. It's a tremendous journey, really. And then basically Sibane Kemet Organics, and I also learn a lot from those colleagues, where we deal also with natural or organic herbs, organic medicines, as it says, Kemet Organics. So yes, it's in those spaces, and then the space where I'm just a father, just me, trying to make sure ukuthi nezami phela iy'nkonyane ngiyazilusa, you know, so that we create children who are conscious, children who understand how to live the right way, the African way. Yize noma sibafundisa esilungwini phela sebeyahumusha manje bakhuluma ngamakhala, you know, but we must always come back in terms of teaching them what it is that they should be doing and they should not be doing. How do you, for example, as a boy, interact with girls? Ngesintu kwenziwa kanjani? How do you as a girl interact with boys? How do you uziphatha kanjani ngokwesintu? You know, ingane ayamukeli into ngesandla sodwa iyaphaphatha. Those are the things, even noma ingasho ngesingisi sithi thank you, kodwa ngesintu iyaphaphatha. So those are the things that are very intricate and very important. So we need to teach those. Noma ngabe behumusha isingisi asibabuyise la entweni zesintu, you know.
Wow, this is so powerful. This is, I think, the next step for every one of us who is here returning to the self, the embodiment of all this spiritual wisdom, spiritual truth, of the lineages that we are part of the teachings that we receive in the different institutions that we are part of. It's now time to embody this and to practice this in our homes, in our relationships with our children, with our parents, with our beloved and our friends. This is vital because I think we spend, and this is because of the inverted systems we spoke of where there is this division, cognitive dissonance between what we are taught and what we actually practice and what we actually do in our individual lives. And we will not change, shift, return Africa to the great power that it was meant to be, if we continue to not take on these practices and actually do them on a daily basis at an individual level, because it starts with us and then it ripples out to the collective consciousness. And in the same way that it started with one man and there was an oppression of women, it also starts with the individual, you who's listening, who is here with us. For whatever embodiment you step into, it becomes the embodiment of our children, the next generation, and we inspire each other to keep doing this. So then Africa returns to its original blueprint, its original power. So this really gives me it's goosebumps, a lot of affirmations on the work that we're doing. And I'm definitely going to lie down and process everything, integrate everything you just taught us. Thank you so much, Mkhulu, for the great teachings of today. And everyone as well who joined us. We had a lot of people joining us today, which was really great. Thank you so much for spending this evening with us and receiving the wisdom of Mkhulu. We are doing this every Tuesdays and Fridays. We have different guests, the teachers, the speakers, and our purpose is to archive African spirituality, archive history, our philosophies, our ways, and we do this because it's time for us to return to the truth, to return to the self, and to heal as a collective and to begin to build the great civilization that is coming. We can feel it. It's going to happen. So you may join us again on Friday, and we will continue to do this particular season until end of November. So thank you so much. Thank you, Mkhulu. Thank you, everyone.
Thokoza. Kubonga mina mama. Thokozani.
Thokoza. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.